Hello, Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer, functional aesthetics EC, helping average guys perform better inside and outside the gym. So today's video, I'm going to give a brief overview of some of my background as it relates to nutrition, bodybuilding, fitness type stuff, and before getting into the meat and potatoes of the video. I think this will help you to better appreciate what I'm going to say later on in the video and help to apply it potentially to your own life. So I guess when I was about 11 years old is when I really started getting into sports and athletics. Prior to that, I wasn't really very much of an athletic sort of kid. I like to sit around a lot, draw pictures, build things out of wood, very artistic sort of individual. Later on, we moved into a neighborhood where most of the kids were involved in sports in some capacity. And so in order to, have people to play with, I needed to become interested in sports as well. And so that's kind of how my journey began. There's a little other stuff involved in that as well, but that's kind of the crux of the matter right there. So since 11 to about 16 years old, I played a lot of the traditional sports. I played soccer, I did taekwondo, I did basketball, and most other organized sports. However, those were like the only ones that I did in an organized fashion. I also did like football and stuff, but that was more around the neighborhood. Played, street hockey, things like that. Generally just, most of the sports the kids were playing in the neighborhood. So in about 99/2000, we moved from Southern California to Wisconsin, and we moved out into the country on the south side of Eau Claire. It was more of a retirement community. There was a lot of older individuals living in the area. There was 2 families with kids in my age bracket, but they were not very much into playing the same kind of sports that I was. And so I would, in order to kind of stay in that athletic sphere, because I gained an appreciation for it. Initially, I wasn't too much into athletics, but as I got into it, I appreciated that I got stronger, the way my body changed, I had more energy. I just felt better overall. And so I wanted to continue doing that. And so I began doing long distance running. And then until about, probably end of junior year, I had a series of back injuries and I had to take some time off from long distance running. And so I got into the gym and started lifting weights under the guidance of my dad. He was a former power lifter when he was in the Marine Corps. And I learned some things from him, just the basics. And wanted to get bigger. So at the time I was about 145 pounds, and after several months of not doing a ton of running, I'd still run a mile in the morning every day with the dog, but after several months of doing that, and also increasing my protein intake slightly, at the time my diet was pretty high in carbohydrates, a lot of cereal, a lot of bread, things like that. Increased my protein a little bit, went up to about 165 pounds, was bench pressing 225 pounds. And I wanted to, I kind of got addicted to this, and I wanted to get bigger and I wanted to get stronger. So I started asking my mom, hey, can I, try some of your whey protein that she would take from time to time? And eventually, she allowed me to do that because back in, I don't know if this was around 2002 at the time, it wasn't super commonplace for kids to be, supplementing with protein powders. That was more the realm of adults and bodybuilders and serious athletes and stuff like that. And so she wasn't too sure about it, but eventually I convinced her to allow me to try it. And around this time, I also got a job at a local grocery store. And so I was training a lot, both right before lunchtime I would train, and then in the evening when I'd get home from work because, and I was stocking shelves all day at the grocery store too. So I'm lifting stuff in my gym, and then I'm lifting stuff all day at work. And then I'd do, several hundred sit-ups and about 75 to 100 push-ups every night before I go to bed. And then on the weekends, my buddies from work were like, hey, let's go to the YMCA and let's play basketball. So I'm not sure exactly what happened, but long story short, I ended up getting extremely sick, respiratory condition, was on the couch, just laying on the couch for several days. And when I recovered from that, had a bunch of issues that I wasn't too sure about. Among them was a lot of digestive issues, a lot of, symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue type stuff, right? And so I'm not sure exactly what contributed to it. I have my theories, but since I'm not positive about what they were, I'm not going to voice them here in this video. So in short, I tried various different diets. I didn't do a lot of research because at the time I wasn't a very studious individual. I liked doing physical activity and hated sitting behind a desk and reading, studying, all that kind of stuff. And so I just kind of copy and pasted various different things. I kind of skimmed through books, tried what they were doing. I tried a kind of hack vegetarian sort of diet, which became more of a grainitarian diet. There's a lot of peanut butter sandwiches, beans and rice, not very many vegetables, and not very much fruit at all. And initially I felt great because I was eating so many more carbohydrates. And when you go from eating a more balanced diet, you jack up your carbohydrate content, your body's really sensitive to the insulin, and so when you increase carbs, all of a sudden you have all this way more energy. And so it worked for a while, and then it stopped working. But I was stubborn, kept going with it. Long story short, while I was in college studying for my associate's degree in heating and air conditioning, over the course of this 2-year program, I lost about 30 pounds of muscle. So I graduated high school, about 175 pounds, up from my 145-pound long-distance runner days. Lost all of that during the course of that 2 years. And then it was time to go off to lacrosse because right out of tech school, I actually did pretty good in the HVAC program and got hired right away at Train Company in lacrosse. And I was working in their research and development facility for commercial refrigeration units. And at this time, I was having a lot of problems with insomnia, brain fog, a lot of other issues, and so I decided that I needed to stop messing around and just kind of winging it as far as my diet goes, and I started to get disciplined and start doing some research to figure out what was going on. Obviously, earlier I tried to go to some GI doctors, some chiropractors, some holistic people and everything at the time, and nobody could really pinpoint exactly what was going on. And so I decided to kind of take what they had given me and build upon that and do my own research and try to kind of put the pieces together. And so I decided that since, I wanted to regain some of that weight, and just eating a bunch of food wasn't working, so I had to decide, well, let's figure out what natural bodybuilders do. How do bodybuilders put on so much quality muscle, and very little body fat when they're doing that? And so I would go to the library and find some books on this stuff. And back in, this is around, 2003, 2004 time period, there wasn't a lot of mainstream advice on, counting your macros, that kind of stuff. This is more the vein of, bodybuilding, right? So I got some of these bodybuilding books and I'm reading this stuff, and I adopted that, eat every couple of hours sort of approach to bodybuilding or to my nutrition. Because before that, it was kind of a feast and famine sort of thing, right? I'd get busy, I wouldn't eat very much, and then I'd get very hungry and I'd eat a lot. I'd eat a whole pizza and a bunch of breadsticks or something like that. Eat a couple, go out to a restaurant, eat a bunch of like steak and, fish or whatever, and then feel horrible after that because I'd ate like the majority of my calories all in one shot. And so instead of doing that, I was splitting it up. I was making sure that they were all balanced meals. And to do this, because most jobs are not going to allow you the, flexibility to be able to eat every couple of hours on the job, right? And luckily, I was, kind of moving around in this facility and stuff, and had to wear coveralls as part of the job. And so I would make these egg, rice, lentil, sometimes split peas, right? I'd cook all the stuff separately and everything, and then I'd, mix it up in the right proportions in an empty yogurt container, and then I'd mix it up and fry it in a frying pan, and then stick these in plastic baggies in my coverall pockets so that, when I needed to get my balanced macros with the proteins and all that kind of stuff, I could just, eat that and wash it down with some water. So this was working out okay, and I definitely felt like I had a little less brain fog. I definitely had more sustained energy throughout the day. I didn't feel like crap from feeling like I ate way too much at one time, and that was working okay, but it still wasn't perfect. And after, a few months in this job, I got let go, which was really hard for me because it was the first job that I'd ever been fired from. So I come back to Eau Claire, and I'm living with my parents for a while, and I'm looking for another job. And I get a job fixing appliances, working for Sears, right? So kind of the same deal happened with that one. They were really short-staffed. Sometimes we'd be driving an hour or more before we get to our first job. We were all over the state. And they needed really a guy who had a lot more experience than I had. So they didn't have the patience for me to allow me to kind of grow into the role that I was in, having my own truck and all that kind of stuff. And so again, I was let go from that one. And I started really feeling like a major failure. So I go and I'm working at the local grocery store, continuing to be very regimented about getting all my meals at the right time. And I was very successful in going from 145 pounds at about 7% body fat up to 185 pounds at roughly 10% body fat by the time I got there. And again, like I said, even though outwardly and physically my body looked okay, I had a pretty decent physique from eating properly, I was still struggling with a bit of brain fog, still struggled to fall asleep at night. I was very tense in the evening and just wired. And so I was watching my brother and sister at I believe it was the buckshot run here in Eau Claire, and I wasn't able to run the race because I wasn't feeling great, anytime I would try to run any length over like a mile or something like that, I would just start feeling like major digestive distress and, just nausea. I'd start getting constricted in my breathing and stuff like that. And so I was just watching, and there was this chiropractor, and he had a booth set up there. And so I started talking to him and decided to work with him a little bit. And he had a little bit of different approach than a lot of the chiropractors that I've been in the past. He was very focused on nutrition as well, and he focused on getting more vegetables, specifically like organic type stuff, minimizing toxins, making sure that you're increasing oxygen in the body to avoid cancer, things like that, and also increasing levels of healthy fats in your diet while also simultaneously minimizing grains, sugars, and especially the refined variety of grains, sugars, and those kind of things, right? And so at the time, in bodybuilding circles, the standard protocol was to have high protein diet coupled with a moderate carbohydrate intake, typically from starchy carbs like rice, beans, oatmeal, potatoes, stuff like that, and then have relatively low fat consumption, right? So 20% of your calories or less from fat. And it worked okay for energy when you're in the gym, but if you didn't get a meal right away because of that low fat content, low fat is a pretty short-term energy substrate, right? Or like carbohydrates are pretty short-term energy substrate. And so if you didn't get the meal that you needed in that 3-hour window, which I wasn't getting, I'd feel like I was tanking. I would start to not be able to think that well because I, had become accustomed to a certain amount of calories and carbohydrates. And so when I made this switch and decreased the amount of starches and stuff that were in my diet, and there's other reason behind it as well, I decreased the amount of starches and then bumped up my fats a little bit, not like crazy like a keto diet, but more of a balanced diet. So another diet that I had tried prior to this was kind of like a zone diet, which is basically 40% of your carbohydrates 40% of your calories coming from carbohydrates, 30% from protein, and 30% from fats. And so I tried this, and again, it was good for just having energy and stuff, but there was some other issues that it was not addressing, particularly like with the brain fog, right? And the ability to sleep at night. And so I switched this around and basically did the zone diet, but removed most of the starches and bulked up a little bit more on the vegetables. Also didn't have a lot of fruit in there, and slightly bumped and basically kept the fat the same for my meals. So I had the protein, the fat, the vegetables, and that actually worked really well for me because the carbohydrates are going to give you this more high octane sort of energy, right? And if your goal is to do like sprinting more, or like PRing on a deadlift, or doing workouts that are more high intensity with maybe even a little bit longer duration, you definitely want to have some complex carbohydrates in there to help fuel you through that. Can you do it on a ketogenic diet? Can you do it on low carbs? Yes, you can, but it's going to take you a while to adapt to that. I was recently listening to a podcast that had Dr. Lee Norton and Peter Attia in this podcast. And Peter Attia, who's a big low carb advocate, he actually was talking about how at the time when he started with low carb stuff, he was doing a lot of cycling and a lot of swimming. and kind of exercising like a maniac. And when he started doing this ketogenic diet, his performance seriously tanked, and it took him like several weeks to get back to where he was aerobically, and it took him almost 18 months to get back to where he was on a strength metric, right? So while you can perform and you can build some muscle on a low carbohydrate diet, it's not ideal for that. And so you don't need to completely strip that out. So I wasn't completely stripping out my carbohydrates. I would bring them back in, but I was mainly focusing on those fats and stuff. So the thing that I did notice is that whereas the carbohydrates give you that quick, fast burst of energy and you feel really, good doing it, the fat doesn't give you that, but it has this prolonged effect where you can go for quite a while and before you start, tanking and running out of gas. And I really like that. The other thing I liked about increasing the fat content was that, and reducing those sugars and stuff, is that my whole life as a child, I struggled with attention deficit disorder, right? And so school was really hard for me. Paying attention, focusing, things like that were really difficult for me. And increasing the vegetables and the fat actually helped me to stay more focused at work and, again, start to feel better so that I could actually go back to school to get another degree, right? And so this was good for me, and this helped me a lot. I tried a lot of other diets as well. And so I say all this because not to promote a low carbohydrate diet, because this is not about promoting a low fat diet, a vegetarian diet, a carnivore diet, doing intermittent fasting. I've done a lot of these different types of protocols, and there's pros and cons to all of them. Like, so for example, eating the high protein, low fat, moderate carbohydrate diet with starches and stuff was probably the best one for me in terms of getting very, very lean, right? I got very, very lean doing this, this sort of diet, because like a lot of times carbohydrates will get vilified. They'll say, carbs are going to make you fat. Well, it's actually very hard to convert carbohydrates into fat. And this is something, carbohydrates get converted into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis, right? And it requires quite a bit of carbohydrate consumption. And then the other thing is with carbs, when you're eating that, especially when you're eating them from complex carbohydrate sources, not like sugars and whatnot, they actually burn a lot of energy just trying to digest those carbohydrates as well. So this is not something that, and again, I want to take this short intermission to promote the benefits of water. So anyway, it takes a lot of overconsumption of carbohydrates to convert into fat. What is more likely the case is that you're eating a lot of carbohydrates in conjunction with a lot of fat as well. So if you eat a pizza, if you're having ice cream, you're getting a bunch of fat with sugar. If you eat a donut, you're getting a bunch of carbohydrates with fat. And the combination of those two together is like a fat bomb. It's a recipe because your body's going to get the energy it needs from the sugar and the carbohydrates, and then it's just going to store the fat because it's already getting its energy requirements from that. So both low carbohydrate diets and low fat diets are effective for helping you to lose body fat. Because in the one sense, if you're eating a low carbohydrate diet, and what it's doing is your body is burning the fat for fuel, as opposed to if you both eat carbohydrates and fat together, then you are burning the carbohydrates for fuel because your body prefers to use those because they're more easily accessible. It doesn't produce as much metabolic waste products as converting fat into ketones does, right? And so your body's going to preferentially use that, and it's going to store the fat. And so at the end of the day, it's eating too many calories that is the problem. And what the problem is, and why a lot of people think that the carbohydrate may make you fat, is that if you're eating these heavily processed sugars, refined grains, and stuff like that, it's going to elevate blood sugar, followed by crash. Your hormones, the insulin and stuff, is going to be all over the board, right? Which is going to cause you to want to eat more food later on. And so it's the excessive calories that you're consuming, not the carbohydrates, that are causing you to get fat. Now, with that being said, if you do want to lose body fat, then you don't want to be giving yourself a lot of fuel in the diet to do that, right? And so that is the one reason why reducing carbohydrates can help you to lose body fat on a ketogenic diet, right? And this is also the reason, so when you're reducing that, then your body doesn't have the carbs that it's accustomed to. It has to go and turn to other fuel sources, namely fat, to get that fuel, right? And this is also the reason why a lot of times people will see initial success on a ketogenic diet, but a few months or whatever, or a year down the road, all of a sudden it stops working for them. And the reason is that you don't need fat to get into ketosis. Eating 70% of your calories from fat, which is usually what the protocol is with ketogenic diet, helps you to get into ketosis, but it is not required. If you simply just ate no carbohydrates or you ate nothing at all, you could get into ketosis. It's just that the fat helps to fill you up. It takes longer to go through your digestive system, and it kind of blunts the hunger. So as opposed to a low-fat diet where you're going to feel hungry all the time because you're getting the insulin spikes from the carbohydrates you're eating, but you're just not allowing yourself to eat enough. And so that is the one main primary benefit of that. And so why a lot of people will end up gaining, or the ketogenic diet might stop working for some people later on, is because if your total calories are not in line with where they need to be, then once your body becomes very efficient at burning fat, it's going to be burning the fat that is in your diet, all this fat, the bacon, the olive oil, the avocados, all that kind of stuff that you're eating, rather than the fat that is on your body. And so at the end of the day, whether it's carbohydrates, whether it's fat, you still need to make sure that you are not over-consuming one or the other, okay? So I spent a lot of time talking about that. And so I say all of this to say that after 17 years of studying this exercise science, nutrition, all this different stuff, I'm still, and even with the advances in nutrition and stuff now, right? Because there's a lot of new ideas out there about, well, it used to be called intermittent fasting, it used to be called fasting, now they, say time-restricted eating, all this different stuff. And some of that is because it's not a true fast, like it's about 16 to 24 hours where you actually start to get into like fat burning mode and stuff when you're on a fast, and it depends on how fueled up you were before that. But there's a lot of different, dietary strategies out there, right? And people will tend to hop from one diet to the next, to the next, to the next, and in reality, you don't need to get that complicated with it. Sometimes you might have a health issue that requires you to, go to one extreme, because like maybe you were on this extreme of eating way too much carbohydrate, way too much sugar, and all that processed stuff, right? And so maybe going low carb for a while may help to bring your body back to balance, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that carbohydrates were bad. And actually, there's another guy that I watch, and on YouTube, and for the longest time, he was huge on doing fasting and ketogenic diet and all that kind of stuff. And he's actually a super articulate guy. He was the reason why I decided to go and get some training and learn some nutritional biochemistry, because I was very impressed at how he could break those things down to such a clear, understandable level. And I was like, I want to understand that kind of stuff too. But anyway, he said the same thing. He's like, that allowed me to lose the weight initially, but now as I start to do more performance, more athletic sort of stuff, I'm realizing that this low carb stuff and all this fasting doesn't jive as well with performance type stuff. And so maybe for everyday life, if you don't do more than, if you're running a 5K every once in a while, or, you're doing your 30-minute workout every day or something, you can probably do well on a ketogenic diet, and it's not going to have any problems. You start to try to do marathons, more, like powerlifting or something like that, or you're trying to bulk up for bodybuilding, it's maybe not going to work so well. So after all this time, what I've come to the conclusion is that there's no one size that fits all, and you want to become more of a detective versus a dieter, right? And this means understanding the role that the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats play in your body, and then with that understanding in mind, you can then fine-tune and adjust your diet depending on the changes in your circumstances, right? You might have different training goals. You might have changes in your lifestyle. Maybe you are working outside all the time, doing manual labor. Then you go and start doing a desk job. Your diet might need to change, right? Depending, from what you're going from, right? And this is why a lot of times high-level athletes, when they stop doing the athletics, they gain a bunch of weight because they haven't transitioned or changed their eating habits from when they're an athlete to when they're an average person, right? And so you need to have a framework for that. And one of the best things that I found, and again, it's not perfect, but it does I guess the ideology behind it, or the thought process behind it, I do agree with. And this is something called metabolic typing. And this is what I give to most of my clients when they come to me, just to get an overlay of where they are at nutritionally, right? And so I discovered this protocol for nutrition while I was reading Dr. Paul Chek's book. It was called How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. It's a great primer on all the basics from toxins, microbiome health, simple movement, stretches, energy work, things like that, from a very high level, not getting super in-depth on any one of those, but it helps lay a great groundwork for that. And so what I did is I kind of took what I learned from Paul Chek on metabolic typing stuff, as well as what I learned from my own experience over the years doing, the macro counting, the bodybuilding, the fasting, ketogenic diet, inadvertently did some carnivore stuff way back in the day after my stint with vegetarian, because I was craving meat so much, all I wanted to eat was meat. So I did that for a while. And so I took that, combined all those things into what I made as an ebook, which is called my Fat Loss Basics, I believe, or Fat Loss Guide. And it's not specifically a guide for fat loss. It's more specifically a guide for helping you to establish the basics, or the foundation of your nutrition. Because from there, and this is why the title of the video is called Macro versus Micro, right? You got to start out with a framework, a baseline of balanced eating, healthy eating, and then you can fine tune it and you can get more specific later on. But if you have no idea what you're eating on a day-to-day basis, and it changes, based upon, your stress level or your activity level or whatever it is, it's really hard to find out what's working and what's not working. And so what I give my clients is this metabolic typing thing to help you fine tune and figure out what works for you. And it also has some accompanying graphs and stuff like that, where you can shows the signs and symptoms of too much carbohydrate consumption versus too much fat consumption, right? And it has both the short-term symptoms as well as the long-term symptoms of excessive carbohydrate consumption, and the same thing for fat as well. And so if you're experiencing any of the symptoms with your diet, you can be, okay, maybe I need to lower that, fat content a little bit, because I'm feeling a little bit heavy in the gut. It's like I don't feel satisfied, but I feel full, kind of thing. That can be another indication that maybe you didn't get the right balance, or the right amount of nutrients that in your diet, right? And so you can kind of fine tune from there. So we start out with a basic framework, and one of them leans more towards a lower fat, higher carbohydrate vegetarian sort of diet. The other one leans more towards a balanced, maybe zone sort of diet, like I was talking about before. And the other one is more towards that higher protein carnivore, ketogenic sort of diet, right? And it doesn't mean that you're stuck in that one forever, right? Because I am not a believer that you should be stuck in one specific dietary protocol for the rest of your life, right? Circumstances change, you change, your goals change, and so you need to be able to, what you do need to do is be able to understand how to modify your diet when those changes do happen. And that's what I discuss in my Fat Loss Basics ebook, right? So the purpose of this video today, and I'm finally getting to it after I don't know how long I've been talking here, probably like at least 15 minutes, is to kind of give you a basics of how I would kind of build a diet here. And I have just some basic different food groups here, and you don't have to use these specific ones, right? There's a wide variety of different nutrients. I like to keep things very simple because it keeps my life simple. When you're very busy and you don't have a lot of time to prep these gourmet meals and all that kind of stuff, then you want to stick with basic stuff and making sure that you're getting the quality and the right things in your diet before you worry about how delectable or gourmet that meal is, right? And I think this is another basic principle, that there's nothing wrong with your food tasting good. In fact, that is one of the joys of life, is eating tasty food. However, at the end of the day, function needs to take a higher priority when it comes to food than how it tastes, right? So if you can make the food taste really good and stick within the framework of this balanced nutrition and what your goals are, then make it taste good, right? But if you have to add a bunch of extra fat or add a bunch of sugar or whatever this thing is, to make that food taste really good, and you're going to eat it because it tastes really good, but it's not providing the nutritional value for you, that's where the problem is. So there's nothing wrong with food tasting good, but that should not be your first priority. And I think, again, that's where a lot of the problems come with health, is that we prioritize feeling good too much in the short term, right? Because in the long term, when you become healthy, when you're fit, there's nothing that tastes as good as being healthy feels, right? And so it's not like you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life. No, you're going to feel better, but in the short term, maybe you have to change your taste buds. Maybe you have to sacrifice a little bit of that, overly doctored up taste that you become accustomed to for long-term, for your long-term health and your long-term success. And the thing is, your taste buds regenerate themselves every, 14 days or whatever. And so if you're worried about, I don't like eating that specific way, don't worry about it. Your taste buds will regenerate, and after a while, you will start to begin liking to eat that way. So figure out first and foremost, how do I need to be eating? And if you have questions about that, you can either reach out to me for a free consult about, your nutrition and everything, or you can ask for that ebook that I made, which kind of lays out a brief overview of what I've been discussing in this video. And now let's get into the basics here. So when you are building your meals, and again, some people will have higher percentage carbs, some people will have higher percentage of fat as their fuel source in their diet, right? But you should have a little bit of all of those nutrients in your diet. And so for me, I tend to be more in that balanced mixed type. For a long time, I was in the more low carb arena, right? 70% or more, sometimes 80-90% of my diet was from fat, right? I'd snack on some nuts throughout the day if I needed it. Mainly, I just fasted throughout the day, and then I would eat a bunch of fat and protein, typically in the form of fatty fish or chicken and avocados. Add some olive oil, tuna or whatever, with some spices, and then have some vegetables, right? And then if I needed it, then I would add, your starches like, your rice. You got potatoes, this kind of stuff. One of my favorite is oats. I don't know, for whatever reason, oats make me feel really strong. And then, I'd have the vegetables, right? And I like frozen vegetables because they'll keep for a long time, and they're really easy. You lay them out the night before in a bowl or whatever, so it catches the condensation. Maybe you have a paper towel in there as well to catch that. And then you just toss them in the fridge. You got at least a whole day, maybe more, worth of vegetables right there that you can eat with your meals. And so then how I structure my meal is you have your protein source, right? And for the sake of simplicity, you've got tuna here. You can use steak, you can use eggs, you can use, tilapia, sardines, chicken, turkey, any variety of things. If you want, you could have some liver, right? So you have that protein. Have the protein as the foundation of the meal. And again, some people are going to have a little bit higher carbohydrate. They're going to feel better on a little bit higher carbohydrate percentage in their diet and a little bit lower fat. But for me, I usually get about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body weight. I get about half a gram of fat per pound of lean body weight. And then the rest of the calories coming from carbohydrates. And so I usually never go more than 1 gram of carbohydrates per pound of body weight, right? If I was trying to get bigger and not just kind of maintain myself, then I might double up on the carbs at a couple of meals and slightly decrease the fat just to increase my hunger levels, put me into a little bit more higher insulin, more anabolic state. I might do that. So anyway, this is what you start out with that. And if we're going too much further, I want to say that when I say eating 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body weight, that doesn't mean that you need to be eating, let's say, for example, 200 grams of protein every day. Because some days, maybe you're not super active, some days you're more active or less active. You got to go by your hunger, right? I've actually personally never found that force feeding myself, so back in the day when I was trying to bulk up or whatever, forcing yourself to eat more food never was really effective. Essentially, I would just become more active. I would move more if I ate more. And that's one of the benefits too. When you have good metabolic health, if you eat too many calories, your body will naturally be like, hey, let's go move more, right? But if you have poor metabolic health and you're eating a lot of sugar and things like that, and you are become insulin resistant, when you're eating more food, you're not going to get that signal, right? And so this is also another thing, like sometimes people are leptin resistant too, which is leptin is that tells you, it's kind of like that fuel gauge to tell you, oh, you have too little body fat on you and stuff, you better eat some more food, right? And this is why sometimes you're dieting down for bodybuilding competition, right? And your body will just start slowing down, and you'll start feeling just hungry all the time. That's basically your leptin telling you, man, you need to eat some more food because you need to fatten up because you're just too lean. And you can, and like back in the day, I would be eating a lot of food, but until my body fat percentage got within the certain range that my body was comfortable with, I would still want to be eating more and more food, right? Until it got to that point. So the advantage, I guess, is, if I go back to what I was saying, is that when you move more, or when you eat too much food, then you're going to want to move more. So the bulking up thing never really worked that well for me. And so what I'm saying, when you're splitting up your meals, don't get too concerned that I have to eat this amount of protein. Rather, because again, you don't want to be eating more than 50 grams of protein at one time. Not because it's going to hurt your kidneys, not because it's going to be bad for your health in some way, but simply because it's expensive and it's inefficient, right? Carbohydrates and fats are much more efficient at providing energy for the body than is protein, right? Protein is primarily a growth and repair building block, and it also assists in the production of hormones, right? But, and if you eat more than 50 grams of protein at one time, through the process of gluconeogenesis, your body's just going to convert any of that excess protein above that into carbohydrates anyway. It's not going to go towards helping you build more muscle. And so that's where we start, right? So you figure out, if you're a guy that needs 200 grams of protein a day, then that means that if you're topping off at 50 grams of protein in the meal, you got to eat 4 meals a day, right, to hit those goals. And then, and so that doesn't mean that you need to be eating all those meals. It just means that every time you eat a meal, it has to have at least 50 grams of protein in that meal. And then you also want to be getting the, probably about 20 grams of fat roughly in your meal as well for that individual, and following that guideline. So again, you want to look at what is the percentage of fat in your diet and then split it up over the course of your meals, right? And that's probably the best way to do it. So now once you have this framework, and that's why I say you want to have the framework in place. This doesn't mean that it's going to get you to your ultimate goal, but this is the starting place where you need to be. You've got to establish that framework, okay? So now that you got your protein, you got your fat, you're going to want to add in, and I recommend, having 1 serving of non-starchy vegetables, so things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, green beans, peppers, lettuce, those kind of things at all of your main meals, right? So you start off eating your protein, and the fat usually is contained within the protein. But other things, like nuts and stuff are, a lot of times people eat nuts and have peanut butter because they're like, oh, it's high protein. No, it's actually a high fat food. It does contain some protein. It's not as high fat as olive oil or like coconut oil or something like that. But it still it can help you to achieve your protein goals, but it's not a high protein food, right? So now you've got your vegetables and everything. And then you pack on top of that, the last thing you're going to be eating would be, so like, for example, you can eat your salmon fillet or your steak or whatever, then eat your salad, and then when you're done, eat that, little bit of rice, eat your potato or whatever, and always go by your hunger. If you're not hungry after you've eaten your steak and your salad, you can just skip the potato, right? And that's one of the benefits of focusing on what you're eating versus how much you're eating. Yes, it's good to have a general idea of how many calories you should be consuming, but in my experience over many years, as I've said, is that if you're eating the right kind of foods, the amount of foods tend to take care of themselves. You'll naturally tend to start reducing weight and get into your ideal body fat range. Now, if you are trying to step onto a bodybuilding stage, being that lean year-round is not healthy. It's not something that your body wants to do. It's not good for the body, right? And so you're going to have to try a lot harder for that, right? And you're going to have to track how many steps you're doing, because you've probably heard of NEAT, or non-exercise associated activity thermogenesis, right? And that's just things like doing yard work, doing cleaning around the house, fidgeting at your desk, things that is not organized exercise. And when you are in this extreme deficit for a bodybuilding competition, you're going to have to actually tell yourself, okay, I have to hit this amount of steps every day, because your body is going to naturally start moving less on its own. So maybe you're still doing your workouts in the gym, and all of a sudden you're like, well, why did my fat loss stall out? Why is it not progressing anymore? Well, it's because you stopped moving as much, right? You're not moving your body as much, and it's inadvertent. You're not conscious of doing it, and so you have to put that in there, right? Because it's not a healthy thing. So if you do want to do that, then you're going to have to take more extreme dietary measures than just focusing on the quality of the food you're eating and the balance of the food that you're eating. And in that case, yes, you're going to have to take more extreme measures. But for the average person, if you just want a healthy diet, because again, it's not healthy to be shredded at 4%, 3% body fat year round, right? For women, somewhere in the 15 to maybe as high as 20% body fat is a good range, right? For female athletes, you can be in that 10 to 15% body fat is good. And for guys can get, a little bit lower body fat percentage and still be healthy. You can get down to, 5, 6% or whatever. I would probably say 6 or 7% is as low as most guys should probably go. And then, as high as 15% for a male athlete is a good range and stuff, and that's going to be good. So once you have all this balance going here, now if you decide that you are like, okay, I want to lose a little bit more body fat, then what you can do is, again, and I already kind of alluded to this, start out with that protein. Focus on your proteins, focus on your vegetables, have your fats with your meal or whatever. Those are the things that you're going to need, because one of the mistakes people make is like, when they go on a diet, they're like, okay, I'm eating less food, so at least when I do eat, I want that food that I am eating to be really good. Right? And so they'll eat less food, but it'll still be this hyper-palatable food. So they're getting less calories, and they're focusing on counting calories, but the calories that they're getting are usually from fat, sugars, carbs, right? So it's like if you are eating, let's say, half a pizza at lunch, and you're like, well, I want to go on a diet, so I'm going to eat just, 2 slices of pizza. Well, now you've reduced your calories, but you've also reduced your protein. And as I talked about in other videos, you don't need a lot of protein when you are getting plenty of calories, right? About 0.7 grams per kilogram of lean body weight is sufficient to help you maintain and even build lean muscle mass when you are getting plenty of carbohydrates and fat and plenty of just calories in general, right? But as soon as you start reducing your calories, then your body is going to be needing to get amino acids and other things that it needs from somewhere, right? And your body does not view muscle tissue as being a high priority. It views your internal organs, your heart, your brain, all those things as being higher need for energy than your having big, bulky muscles, or even just having decent sized muscles, right? And so it's going to strip those off first. And this is why a lot of times you see these people who are starving and they'll have really scrawny arms and stuff like that. And again, their belly isn't like fat, it's bloated because usually of a protein deficiency, right? And so that's why you want to keep your protein the same and still continue to eat the same. And that's why you need to have the structure to begin with. Right? A balanced diet and eating sensibly is not per se for weight loss. It might if you were eating, if you were binge drinking all the time and you're eating a donut every morning for breakfast and, pizza for lunch and all this kind of stuff. And if your diet was atrocious, but most people aren't eating horribly all the time, right? But again, if you need to lose some body fat, the balanced diet is probably going to help you to maintain yourself where you are. But if you want to get leaner and stuff, you're probably going to have to reduce the calories, but you don't want to reduce the calories from your protein. So you want to maintain that protein in there. You want to maintain your vegetables, and then you can cycle the carbohydrates. And what I mean by cycling is that, if you're having these carbs at every meal, remove them from 1 or 2 meals. Let it ride, see how it goes, because by removing the carbs from one meal, you're automatically putting yourself in this calorie deficit. You're getting less calories, and just see how it goes. The goal is to reduce calories as little as possible while still seeing results. Okay, and then if after a couple weeks, and you're still not seeing any progress, it's kind of stalled out or whatever, you can remove a little bit more carbohydrates, right? And the other thing to keep in mind too is that low carbohydrates is good for fat loss, but not no carbohydrates, unless, of course, you're going to ketogenic diet. And the thing is about low carbohydrates is that they actually keep your metabolism going a little faster, right? And so having them reduced just slightly helps the Krebs cycle move a little, keep on spinning fast enough so that you're still burning calories at a good rate. But if you go down lower, then everything just kind of slows down a lot. And so you want to keep it up a little bit higher for the most part, right? And if you get down to a point where you're eating very low carbs all the time and you're not prepping for a bodybuilding competition or whatever, you're still stalled out, you might need to start kind of gradually scaling back maybe on the cardio a little bit, gradually reintroducing some of those healthy carbohydrates back into your diet. And as soon as you start gaining some body fat, that's when you stop, dial it back just slightly, maintain there for a while, because you want to get your body, not allow your body to adapt to that low calorie state. And so that's the basics of what I want to talk about today. Couple things I guess I could throw in here too. This is not the crux of it. Fish oil. So these are some supplements I think everybody should probably be taking, some sort of omega-3 fatty acids. If you're vegan or vegetarian, getting flax seeds is a good option for that. Liposomal vitamin C. If you're taking high dosage of vitamin C because of stress, then the liposomal form can be better, because if you're taking a lot of vitamin C at once, it can cause diarrhea and other issues. So this is just more digestible. Vitamin D, especially here in Wisconsin, that's a great one for so many different issues related to your health. So these are just the basics. I mean, you might have individual supplements that you want to take for your particular health issues. And again, I'm not a doctor on this stuff. These are just basic things that most people should be doing. One thing I started taking recently is ubiquinol. It's good for mitochondrial function, basically helping you have more energy. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It helps to create ATP, help create energy. As you get older, you're not producing as much of that, so assisting yourself with some of this. And of course, going out, getting some physical activity every single day, doing some breathing exercises. If you don't have a lot of time, go for a walk, whatever it is. That's a great way to increase mitochondrial health as well. Ashwagandha, this can be kind of stacked up with the vitamin C. Ashwagandha is good for if you have a lot of stress in your life, right? It's actually been shown to help increase testosterone levels as well. Not directly, but there's an inverse relationship between cortisol and testosterone, right? So when cortisol is elevated, testosterone is suppressed. So when you have more stress in your life, your testosterone, when stress is chronically elevated, right, then testosterone can tend to go down. So by helping to reduce cortisol levels, with ashwagandha stuff, it can help you to, manage that cortisol, help you to maintain optimal levels of testosterone. So the last ones, zinc and magnesium. I get this from this Dr. Carolyn Dean Remag. It's like a liquid pico form of zinc and magnesium. I've been taking this for years. I really like it. I think it kind of makes my water taste good as well. And those are also some good things to help support your hormonal health. So if you guys are interested in getting my Fat Loss Basics ebook, leave me a message in the DMs or send me an email at aceproaaron@gmail.com, or reach out to me again at my email address, aceproaaron@gmail.com, to set up your complimentary consultation to see if we might be a good fit to work together. Again, thank you for watching the video. Hopefully this gave you a little bit better perspective on how to finally achieve your fitness goals. And we'll see you all next time for more health and fitness information.